Welcome back, everyone. This is Austin Reville on our From the Vault series here, presented by 2FBC Tactical. We're pretty excited that you guys continue to tune in to us, and we really appreciate it. We have a very rapidly growing audience, so that's really awesome to see. Please like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow some more. You know, YouTube, obviously, when it comes to the algorithms, isn't always the best when it comes to firearms, and we just want to continue to grow and get out there. One of the things that we really enjoy doing is bringing you these kind of rare and somewhat historical firearms that come through our shop. Sometimes they're not super rare, they're just kind of interesting, and we have one of those for you today that isn't necessarily rare. We see a lot of them, but they are interesting, and we have a very unique variation of that today. So without further ado, let's get into this. This is this Lee-Enfield SMLE No.1 Mark IV right here. Now this one is a kind of a unique one. Well, you say, well, I've seen one of these before. That's true. You played Battlefield 1942. You play, was it Battlefield 5? You played Call of Duty World War II. You've played any of the early Call of Duties, the Big Red One, Call of Duty. Obviously, if you've done Medal of Honor, if you tune in to, say, A Bridge Too Far, or even the Band of Brothers series, these make appearances. So these aren't rare by any means. They're widely out there for you to collect. Over 17 million Lee-Enfield rifles would be made over the course of history, starting with the No.1s, going all the way up to the No.4s. There are obviously some smaller variants of the No.5 jungle carbines that would be made. Unfortunately, don't have one of those for you here today, but we'll get one in eventually to bring to you guys. But this one here is a U.S. property marked Savage made No.4 Mk I, which is indicated right here on the receiver. If you can see, says a big S, No.4. U.S. property mark right here at the top. So what does that mean? That means this was made on the Lend-Lease program for the British during World War II. This is a Lee-Enfield design, British design. It was made under license here in the United States by Savage Arms to be sold out to the British on the Lend-Lease program. These would see some very limited service and with the Canadians as well, but they had their Long Branch variant that they lived with. So there isn't a whole lot of differences between them. There's some minor ones, and we're going to point them out today. So I happen to have here a No.4 actual British Lee-Enfield. Now this is a post-war one from the 1950s, 1955. So this is actually a Mark II, not a Mark I, but there are some slight differences in them. And we do have a No. 3 here, Lee-Enfield, which is the earlier variation. So we're going to kind of just go through these a little bit and look at some of the different variations and where they came from. So let's start rolling back the clock a little bit to the Mk3. All right, that's what this one is here. This one is from 1918. This is a Lithgow, which is the Australian manufacturer of this particular one. This is an issued World War I one. How I know that is the fact it's been rebarreled by the factory and for serialized matching. They did that for issued rifles. So the differences between these are going to be somewhat small, but still significant. So the No.4s would feature a heavier barrel than the 3s. Reason why? The assist with recoil control. But all these feature some very similar designs. The bolt remains largely the same. It is a spring assisted. And what I mean by that, it pops open like that when you rock it. So these are spring assisted bolts. Stripper clip fed. You can do that on all these. These are all stripper clip fed. All these are 303 British, the standard cartridge. The biggest differences you're going to see in them is overall length. The No.4 is just slightly longer than the No.3, not by much. The real main differences you're going to see in them is in the front sight post, where this features kind of full body, kind of blocky front sight protected by your wings right here. This is your bayonet mount. You would put it over this little nub here and it would lock into place right back here. Whereas the No.4s would feature a more open sight. It still has the wing protection, but there is cuts to open it, and again, this was done to lighten up the overall rifle, especially the end. And it features a locking lug up here that you would see in fully flushed out with suppressors, where it goes to a tri-lock, but that's what this would feature. When it comes to the sights, all right, there's some differences. So the original MK3s featured a rear sight post here that was forward of the breech. This is kind of done in a lot of World War I era variants. This is a World War I era rifle, where this is a interwar upgrade rifle system. We would move these back in the United States kind of very early on in the Eddystone, which is the Lee-Enfield 1917 pattern rifles that we would produce here in the United States, with the Eddystone, with Remington, with Winchester. So there was a few different manufacturers. They became famous with Sergeant York. We'll have to do a video on one of those at some point here in the future. We do have an example. But for greater increased accuracy, we would move the sight to the rear. And that's really where you see the differences in the Enfields. So the number 4 MK1 features just kind of a little peep sight here in the back. Nothing elaborate, very simple, right? It has 2 settings for distance, whereas the MK2s would feature a full alignment sight featuring elevation, all on a screw up and down system. In the rear, though, keeping in line with the shift to the back of the receiver. Now, why would we be the ones that do this exclusively? No. When you look at, say, the Germans, they did not do this. They kept that front of the breech World War I era sight pattern that you would see kind of on the MK3. So yes, this is a Nazi K98K here with the forward sight post. Now you would also see that done with the Mosin Nagant here by the Russians. So again, forward of the breech sight post. So these were kind of ahead of their time in that era. Now when we came to our M1 Grand, obviously we have a sight, peep sight at the very rear, again to create greater accuracy. So that is where these would get the shifts in. So in some ways a little bit ahead of the time compared to the competition. Now these would all feature 10-round removable magazines. Though to be fair, when we say removable, it's not as removable by today's standards. So the magazine release catch is this little switch right inside the trigger. See if I can do it. It's not the easiest. You would push up on that, and it's tight, and then you would pull out your magazine. This is not something that was really taught where you were doing full magazine changes. You were mostly stripper clip feeding your magazine. So this was treated still kind of as an internal box magazine. There certainly were instances where they would carry fully loaded spare magazines and just swap them out, but it's not done to the ease of the modern firearm. This was a feature that was featured on the MK3. So in World War I, this was radical. First off, you have a full rifle cartridge bolt action rifle with 10 rounds, while everyone else had 5. So you got 5 extra rounds, and you have a fairly, especially for that day's standards, easily removable box magazine. Very, very radical for the time. But these Enfields really would see extended service all the way up until the 21st century. In India, under the Ishapur flag, because obviously India was a part of the British Empire till the late 1940s, they would still use these and issue these out, these number 4s and even number 3s, all the way up until really right after the Mumbai attacks in 2010. That is when it became apparent that they were woefully underarmed for that unfortunate terrorist attack, and that really caused that to be way worse than it could have been had the SWAT teams, their version of the SWAT teams, I should say, been fully prepared with modern weaponry against what they were going up against. So you would see a full retrofitting of their police forces with modern weapons. Now, their military obviously still issued modern weapon system. It was really their law enforcement that were using these things. You are starting to see the number 3s that have been rechambered in, say, 410 riot guns, single shot 410 loads. The Indians did that. When we say Indians, we're talking about India. Did that, made some modifications to those. And then we did the 2A in the previous video, where they made modifications to these guns to try to make them more modern for the time. But they're very cool. The fact that we have a Savage one, this one is in my personal collection, a Savage production Enfield. It's not very often you see those. They don't come up all that often. It does have a little trench art on it. I'm sure you saw that in the back, that was done obviously after the fact. Don't know by who, but the fact that we managed to get one of these is really cool. You can kind of see the progression of moving the sights around, their overall length, just kind of how the contour of how they did it, though most of that didn't change. It's more in what we would call the pistol grip here would change. It's a little bit more flat here, where it's a little bit steeper in the later iterations, not by much, not a true pistol grip. It's more of just a grab here. The butt plate would stay predominantly the same, though the Savage ones would use stainless steel, where these use brass for the butt plates. Now the MK5, the number 5, the jungle carbine, which are number 4s that were modified, did not feature that. They put a plastic piece on the end because by cutting down the barrel, still using 303 British, the recoil was terrible, so they thought by gluing on this hard plastic piece that would help. It did not. Spoiler alert on that one, and I hope I can get one to kind of show you off some of the differences that were done, but they're just number 4s that were modified. They weren't designed to be that in the beginning. But this is one of the more popular, more widely proliferated firearms, especially by the British. I'd make the argument this may be the last, the second to last firearm that Lee-Enfield made that was truly great. The FAL variants that they would make, of course, would serve with great distinction all the way through the to the 80s, and then they adopted their current monstrosity, which we won't get into today. But that is this is the beginning of the end for the Lee-Enfield factory, at least in the modern era, unfortunately. I do appreciate you guys tuning in. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Look forward to seeing you guys in the future. And until next time.